Click the links to join the channel here, become a valued member, or over at Subscribestar, the various other links. So Comicsgate Revolution has got these soy mainstream Marvel cat ladies. Their panties are all twisted, even though it's been like, what, 5 or 10 years? It's kind of hard to say when Comicsgate kind of loosely started, but, probably 7, 8 years going hardcore. So there's a lot going on with this. Where to start? Comicsgate is this tiny group of loosely connected network using the YouTube platform. It's this community selling comics. That's what it is. Though the left wing has this straw man version of Ethan and Richard and all these other people who are associated with comics, but it's just this bizarre straw man version. They go, but they argued with BLT creators. It's like, yeah, the BLT creators argue with them, but it's okay to go one way. It's like, no, it's a back and forth. Like they're talking about like 5 or 10 years ago when Zach was reviewing comics, and like there was a back and forth going on between people. It's like they criticized the marginalized, oppressed, and disenfranchised person. It's like, but you criticize the marginalized, oppressed, and disenfranchised person because that's how I identify Myers, is all those things. But that's not real. It's like, well, yeah, maybe none of it is real. It's like it's two adults going back and forth. Is it possible? Is it possible that it was just adults going back and forth? That it's a two-way street, and in their minds, it's not. Like they have this conclusion already set up in their minds. Anyway, so Comicsgate, they're on YouTube. They do these shows. They're trying to entertain you, and they sell comics. And on a pretty small level for the individual creator, they are successful. But it's of course it's a drop in the bucket compared to the big four, mostly Marvel, DC, and then there's Image and Dark Horse. But at the individual level, they're doing what they enjoy, is making stories, and more importantly, making money doing it. It's a nice combination when you can, and plus, it's not just that. It's that they're part of a fun little Comicsgate network where it's more focused on, free speech, free expression, anti-cancel culture. It doesn't mean you have to associate with everyone if they're a little too edgy for you. I'm not saying that, but like there is the dogma of they left the SJW, they're anti the SJW comic platform, what the mainstreams were doing. So it is a refreshing change of pace, but it's also a fun little bit of a network because you're allowed to be, you don't have to be politically correct, where the mainstream absolutely does. In fact, they'll cancel you for it, and like, yeah, we're not fans of that kind of stuff. Anyway, so it's a nice combination of a network, and it's kind of a new network thing using social media to combine these individuals together, and it all works. And the left wing critique of it is like, you're just like, it's all the same. It's like the money's just going around a circle. It's like, that doesn't make any sense because the platforms take money. That's the weirdest levels of copium. So why are and hey, Fund My Comic, I think, is a new platform that opened up, and I think they only take a few percent from the sales. And I think Kelsey Shannon is over there now selling his stuff over there. So like the thing is with Comicsgate is Indiegogo and Kickstarter are not good platforms. And if you're on those platforms and you're counting on organic discovery, that's one thing. But if you're in Comicsgate, you're going to be censored and pushed to the bottom. You're not going to get any organic discovery because those companies are run by SJWs. It's cool they allow the sales, but it's like there's no organic discovery there. You're bringing your audience with you. So Fund My Comic, which is a tiny little platform, it doesn't matter because if you're bringing your audience with you, it's going to result in the same. Like you can go anywhere. You could sell it off your own website if you wanted to. That's why I think Fund My Comic is a very important place to kind of, hopefully Comicsgate people will get behind. Anyway, so why are these mainstream soy boys and cat ladies still carrying a grudge about Comicsgate from like 5 to 8 years later? For a few reasons. One, they're rejecting the globalist bullshit nonsense, all the SJW crap, and they're not under their thumb and they're able to spread a counter message, and for that, for some reason, pisses them off. Even if Comicsgate is this tiny little group, they want everyone under their control and they don't want alternatives to exist. And the other reason, this is going to sound nuts, before Elon Musk bought Twitter, mainstream comics people didn't get paid so much in hard currency because the comics didn't sell, so they couldn't get paid, but they got a Twitter blue check mark, and they kind of got paid in dopamine and exposure, which most of the time is obviously a con, but not always. If you can parlay it into that exposure into selling your own crowdfunded comic, or into promoting yourself to sell something, if you can turn it into currency, then it's worth it. But obviously most of the time it's not. But that Twitter blue check mark, as crazy as it sounds, that used to be a big deal to them. Like really, like they were willing to have like Marvel after their name and a blue check mark and 40,000 followers on Twitter or something, and they thought that was something. And you look at them, it's like, but you're not turning it into money. It's just like a status symbol for you. It's like, yeah, status symbol to them was actually worth money to them. I know it sounds nuts, but then Elon bought Twitter, and for $8 everyone could have the blue check mark, and that kind of drove them crazy. So some of the perks for working for Marvel for low wages and high exposure vanished overnight. And I know it sounds crazy to think like a status symbol is worth money to them, but it really I've been following this for 8 years. It really, you have to know the mentality of these people. Like, they're not, a lot of them are not playing with a full deck. And to be fair, like when they're younger, they think that status symbol, it means something. They can turn into something. And then they do it for a few years and they realize like, yeah, I'm not turning into something. It's not actually, it's just like I'm getting screwed by Marvel. It's like, yeah, you're getting screwed by Marvel and DC and probably Image and Dark Knight also. So you can make X dollars a year doing something in the mainstream where you're working on somebody else's intellectual property, or you can join a Comicsgate network. And while you're going to struggle the first few years, you'll be able to work on a story that you own the IP rights for. But the whole time, this little Comicsgate has got the Heather Antos, Gail Simone cat ladies out there who are always focusing on them and working to try to destroy them. Simply because they were terrified that the public was starting to become aware that the people making these woke cancer comics were these insane blue-haired weirdos. Comicsgate was able to succeed because the mainstream was so bad that it could be parodied. So another aspect of it is the guy in this industry saw the Comics Broke Me tweet and decides to start a Discord for the Comics Fairness Society. And at first it was going to be open to anyone who wanted to discuss the situation. But then he quickly decided to turn it into something where people had to be vetted so they could stay in an echo chamber. Because I think some Comicsgate people were asking, "Hey, I've sold $250,000 worth of comics on Amazon. Can I jump in this and can we discuss the industry?" And it's like, yeah, you're not welcome. And the thing is, ultimately, the whole thing is pointless because they're not selling things that people want to pay for because it's all woke and they're firmly dedicated to that. The Comics Broke Me thing that came out a couple weeks ago was dealing with the low-paying conditions in the mainstream, which might be true, but part of the situation is the comics, and the thing is, like, yeah, I'm sure it is true. I take their word for it. So yeah, it's like trying to get money from these billion-dollar corporations. Yeah, you absolutely should try as many collective bargaining power. Like, just because it's left and right, like, you don't have to argue over every simple thing. Like, if you actually agree on something, then work together to look for the similarities, not the differences, to try to agree on these things. Yes, you should definitely get paid way more from Marvel, the artists, whether from the comics or from the when the comics get made into movies and they get the intellectual property payments for that. Yes, like the movies should be paying these people much more because there's plenty of money to go around, but they don't. It's like, well then, like the left wing's in this kind of weird position where it's weird because, at one time the left wing was raging against the machine, but now they know that Hollywood is pushing this left wing model. So for like a left wing subgroup to start trying to talk about how insidious the left wing Hollywood is, they're not going to get as much support as they would have a couple decades ago. I mean, that's kind of another video, and this would be an hour video, but I think some of you perhaps know what I'm talking about with that. So they're kind of, the left wing at the working end of the stick is actually in a worse position now than they would have been 10 plus years ago. Anyway, so the Comics Broke Me thing was dealing with those conditions, but part of the situation is comics just don't sell that much, and many of the super woke ones actually bomb. So the better selling ones have to subsidize the lower selling ones, since some of the pay is kind of socialized, so everyone ends up making less. Instead of just canceling the low selling stuff and telling them to end the woke preachy cancer and focus on sales, but that's obviously never going to happen. If I was taking over these companies, I'd look at it and be like, okay, cancel the bottom 20% right off the bat. And we'll focus on what is connecting with the audience. And you look at that, they would look at you like you had two heads, like you'd showed up wearing white sheets and were just a monster or something. You can't get paid well if your comic only sells 30,000 issues a month. 4 times 3 is 120K, split in many ways. All the artists, the distribution, the endpoint seller, and the company itself. The money just isn't there after all the, plus the tax man, after all those splits. So the Marvel ends up paying you kind of an exposure, and Twitter used to give people this blue check mark, which was very coveted at the time. But after the 2020 Wu Flu pencils down Boogaloo, the whole vibe of comics changed. They lost a bit of their luster people kind of realized, yeah, we're not able to convert we can't eat the blue check mark. It's not turning into money. It's not turning into side jobs. So while they were internet famous, it didn't pay the bills. And the funny thing is, like, Comicsgate by that time had been 2020 firmly established for 5 years as the entity called Comicsgate. I think it got its name in about 2015. Maybe 2016. And so the Comicsgate was looking around. It's like, yeah, we may be small, but our pencils aren't down. Like, Comicsgate is still going strong. Like, people are still making comics and buying and selling comics because they were doing it from home. You didn't need an office. You didn't need any kind of office. I mean, it's sometimes it's nice if you all live locally to be able to have a garage and convert it. That is definitely convenient. But like now with, networking, I mean, networks and like the digital, the hardware and the software, and the ability to do like high resolution scans, like super high resolution scans, and draw on the computer. It's like most of the stuff is digital anyway, so you can do stuff where people are in different states or even in different countries, and it's all digital. It's like, yeah, our Comicsgate pencils aren't down. They're still making comics. Like, sales might dip a little bit because the economy's dipping a little bit, but they didn't collapse where the mainstream did collapse. It did absolutely. It stopped for like at least a year while they panicked over the Wu flu, which I gotta admit I did not panic over. #pure blood. Anyway, then they're able to look at YouTube and they see this little community of literally chat Nazis. Well, I mean, not literally, but figuratively. Oh, well, I mean, not figuratively either. It's like diversity of thought means everyone who disagrees with me is literally the Austrian corporal. That's kind of childish, isn't it? Well, it's worked for us for the past 5 years. Has it really worked for you, that argument? I mean, it kind of seems like, anyway, like if you don't groom kids, you're Hugo Boss. Like, okay, you realize that's a binary that nobody's going to join the side of grooming kids. If you say, Satan himself is against grooming, we're like, oh, hey, sign me up, Satan. Let's start marching. Anyway, so you had this network of people who were selling comics and having fun, and the straw man arguments against people like Ethan mostly got most of the heat because Zach is kind of a quiet, reserved. He kind of dropped out of limelight. He's just continually selling hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of comics per year, kind of quietly, where Ethan took a lot of the attention for good or for bad, because like you have to have a very thick skin to have thousands of people hate you per day, and that's a pretty good stressor event. But the thing is, when you're laughing in millions of dollars, it's as Abe Lincoln said, it's hard to make a man feel bad when he knows his God loves him. Well, the next best thing is crying in $100 bills type of thing. So the straw man version of like the people in Comicsgate, like the Mike Miller and all these other people, they were trying to like straw man as just these monsters, and you look at them, it's like I'm just seeing a bunch of 40, 50-year-old guys on social media selling comics. Like, are some jokes politically incorrect? Yeah, but I think political correctness is cancer, so I think it's funny. It's like, so you're gonna pay this guy $30 for a comic that maybe you don't even care about to own the libs? Yeah, it's worth it. But that's the wrong reason to buy comics. Who cares? And that's what they realize. Like, they hate not being able to control you. Anyway, so people in Comicsgate were having fun. Then Elon gave the blue check mark to everyone for $8, and your tweets would get pushed higher to the front. You had a higher word count. Oddly enough, the SJWs wouldn't pay for it out of stubbornness, so they're getting pushed down in the algorithm. So Comicsgate is growing, and the mainstream soy boys are actually shrinking. And if you search Comicsgate on Twitter, you get the Comicsgate people having fun, and then you get these absolute weirdos, these anti-Comicsgate haters who dedicate their time to hating on Comicsgate, which they can't monetize, so it doesn't make sense. Until you realize there's a lot of mental illness on the left, that these anti-CG people are not passionate about the stuff that they claim to defend. They don't care about mainstream soy comics. Nobody does. It's just a vector to push this SJW pox walks, furry prawn, BLT, pronoun, Trump derangement syndrome type of nonsense. That is mostly a fad. No offense if you're a kid who's like very firmly into that. You're probably not going to be firmly into that in 10 years. Remember, you can't unsuck a dick, so keep that in the back of your mind. They know the mainstream comics suck. When you browse their Twitter, it's all them talking about sports ball or alt-left politics. There's nothing to actually say about the comics because they know they're just woke propaganda. And ultimately, it's if you're a name in comics and you work for the mainstream, it's somebody else's. It's this big corporate faceless entity, this jural entity. Somebody else's intellectual property. It's like, you don't care. Like, maybe you had some connection to Spider-Man when you're a kid, but you get involved in the industry and you realize, like, yeah, it's just this, like, people in suits. Looks like it's just a commodity, these people. It's much better to do your own thing if you can afford to. Anyway, Comicsgate focuses on how much time? Oh, 40, 15 minutes. Shit. On selling comics and selling entertainment. But the SJWs, the Scott Kurtzes, the Mark Wades of the world, they focus on trying to shut down Comicsgate because it's wrong think, out of sight, their control, and goes against the globalist narrative. 15 minutes is this. Honestly, I think this was. I look at this now, I really think this is. I kind of get a little crazy with these notes because I got a wireless keyboard and it's like I type really fast and I realize like, yeah, this is just gonna go on for a half hour. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. Like, comment, subscribe. You can join the Subscribe Star. Sometimes there'll be longer versions of videos up on this. Okay, this is this guy is so sad. It's like he starts this comic and he's got like I look at his social media footprint. I believe he has a very small social media footprint. So a lot of these people don't understand. You have to use social media to sell everything. It's like you divorced. Your social media is what you're selling. Like these are not the old days where you clock out and the thing is over. It's like it's the 24/7 thing where everything you represent. So it's like you want to be very delicate on social media if you're selling something. And so this is what they're talking about in their Discord. It's like somebody who's loosely associated with CG. And they go, "Oh, that's a wrong thinker." And you go, and if I remember years ago, who's that? The one guy who was like on the fence about CG, he was asking for evidence. And he kept asking for evidence. I think he was working on Cecil's cash grab book. And he was asking for evidence. Like, well, so why do you say Comicsgate is bad? And once you just start asking for evidence, they know that you're not on their side and you're a wrong thinker because they don't want, they want you to just trust. Like, listen, hey, this person says something that the crowd doesn't agree with. And you go, if you start asking for evidence, well, you're not a left winger. Like, ultimately, you're not going to be, like a true liberal nowadays is just a right-wing Hugo Boss because you're asking for evidence and due process and cross-examination and examine the evidence and argument, counter-argument, rebuttal, all this kind of stuff. It's like, oh, yeah, you're not a leftist anymore because a leftist is a witch hunt. It's part of this left-wing mob where if you start asking questions, they just know you're not them and like you're going to be on the right sooner or later, which is what happens. So anyone who's loosely associated with CG is just a wrong thinker. And you go, but what did they do? And they go, oh, well, 8 years ago, Zach got in an argument with some BLT creators or Pox creators or something, where he was criticizing their comics. And you go, that's it? Well, it's like, well, it was more than that. It was back and forth for sure. And it went on for several years. But it was a two-way street, right? Like an adult would look at this, an impartial mediator, arbitrator would look at this and goes, yeah, it seems like it's a two-way street between adults who are consenting to digital combat. Oh, well, no, you don't understand. It's like I can say that I'm firmly on the right, this Comicsgate side, but I can say, yeah, it was a two-way street. They did some good things and some bad things, and sometimes both people, solid sides, said things they regret. As an adult, I can say that. I can say it's a 50-50 back and forth. But these left-wing anti-CG people go, no, it's you can't criticize someone who we say is in this protected category. I go, but I don't believe in your category, or if you believe in your category, then I say, well, but Myers is in that same category. In my opinion, he's marginalized, disenfranchised, oppressed, and othered because I feel it. I feel that way, and if I feel it, it's valid. It's like, but your feelings aren't valid, but our feelings are. It's like once you open the door to appeal to emotion, it's all on the table. Anyway, this can go on for a half hour. It's a very passionate topic of mine. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys all next episode.